Hey guys, it's Lisa and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to make some flowers and we're going to concentrate more on fall flowers. But I am going to start with a shabby rose because that's the one that I make the most often. If you've watched me long, you've seen me make these. Now this is the fabric Warm and Natural, which is like a quilt batting. And I will link this in the description, but it's so good for making flowers because it has kind of a puffiness to it, which works really well. Now I start with a circle. If I'm not making these directly on my project, then I just start with a little circle and I tie a knot in the end of a cut strip of the Warm and Natural. You can't tear this stuff, so you'll have to cut it. But you don't have to be exact in how you cut it. Now this one I'm making a little bit thicker than I generally do because I wanted to really zoom this in and let you guys see close up without speeding through it how I do this. So what I do is I just glue that knot to the center, and then I just keep twisting my fabric and gluing it. And you can twist in the same direction, or you can occasionally change directions, which adds even more dimension. You just kind of play with it and see what you think you need to do with each twist. But generally, I go back and forth quite a bit, and that adds the most dimension. As you can see, it very easily makes this look like a little shabby rose. So you just keep doing it until either you run out of your backing that you're building it on, or until you get the size that you want. And then when you get the size that you want, if there's anything excess left over, then you just cut it off. You can actually keep adding to this even when you run out of the backing if you want your rose to be larger, because you're at that point you're not going to be gluing to your back piece, but you're going to be gluing to the twisted to the one that you've already twisted around, if that makes sense. But see, I have some left over, so I'm just going to cut off the excess. And then if you want, you can do like I'm doing and glue a little pearl bead in the center. But you can make these out of different fabrics. I really like the Warm and Natural, but you can make them out of just about any fabric. So I'm showing you some bases that you can use for these. You need some sort of a ring. Shower curtain rings will work just fine for smaller flowers. And little girls' plastic bangle bracelets will work, or any kind of little bangle bracelet. But I just took some wire and wrapped it around a small jar and then twisted it closed. And that's what I'm using here, just to show you that you don't have to have certain items on hand. You can make do with what you have. And for this particular flower, all that I'm doing is I have cut little, probably 8 or 10 inch pieces of Raffia grass, and I'm just forming a loop in the center and pulling my tails through that loop to add them to this. Now you could tie them on if you wanted. This is just an easy way to do it, and it gives it I feel like a neater appearance around the wire. So you just do this all the way around, and you just have to make sure when you're using this type of center that when you get around to that knot, it's gonna take a little bit more effort to make sure that you cover that up well. So once I get that covered, then I'm just take my scissors and cut the length that I want it all the way around. Now this one took a little bit more time than when you're using cloth, I felt like. And I guess I wish that the Raffia grass was a little bit more flowy and not as stiff. Now you might be able to, at this point to to let it soak in some water before you add your center and let it get soft. I don't know if it would stay soft or not though. So now I've cut a piece of Warm and Natural, and this is a quilt batting. I've cut a piece of it. This is what I used on the Shabby Rose. So I cut a circle a little bit bigger than my opening, and I'm just gluing that to the back. And this, or this could be the front, either one. So once I get this glued all the way around, I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to put some polyfill in on the other side. I'm going to be adding another piece of cloth to this side, but first I want some polyfill in there. Now, an easier way to do this, with this one I was just kind of playing and figured it out as I went, but an easier way I think to do this would be to go ahead and put your next circle on, and but leave an opening to stuff it. Because the way I did it, once you put that other fabric on there, you have to kind of keep that polyfill back out of your way as you glue. So that would have been easier just to leave an opening. I made it work though, and it's completely doable. It's just, again, it would save time and effort to do it the other way. Now here you could use burlap if you wanted, or a number of fabrics, as long as they're thick enough that you're not going to see that polyfill in the center. So again, I just glue this all the way around, making sure that I keep that stuffing pushed back out of my way. And then I collected a little stick out of the yard, and where I didn't glue it all the way around, I just glued that stick in there and made sure to put enough in there that it was good and sturdy, and then I glued the bottom closed. And then I took some Mod Podge and went around the outer edge first, because I wanted more concentrated on the outer edge, and I put cinnamon over the top of it. And then I put Mod Podge over the whole thing and lightly put the cinnamon on the inside. And as you can see here, I cut a leaf shape. I folded a piece of burlap and cut a leaf shape, leaving it connected in the center, and then just kind of wrapped that around my stick and glued it together to form one leaf. And this is what this one looked like finished. Again, I would prefer that the leaves be more flowy, but I still was happy with how it turned out. I think it has a really fall look to it. And then this one, I got some just some country fall fabric that's printed on both sides. That is important. And I tore it into strips, and I'm cutting it. These are probably about 6 to 8 inches long. The exact size is not that important, because most of the time you're going to trim them down somewhat, but you need at least, I feel like, 6 inches so that it's easy to loop around your circle. And this one, I'm just doing it on a little child's bangle bracelet. This is a little metal bangle bracelet, but I just loop these all the way around. Again, you could tie them. I just really like the look of the loop. And I think it's important that when you're looping these, that you always put your loop in from one side. So in this case, I'm taking my loop underneath and then pulling my tails out the top, because it's just going to give you a more uniform look around your flower. With this particular one, I'm pretty sure that I glued something over the top of both sides like I did the last one, so it's not incredibly important on this one. But some of the flowers that I'll be doing, those loops are going to show, and you'll see that later when I get to those. but that's when it's the most important that you just keep your loops in the same direction. So for this one, where I used warm and natural fabric for the circles, I'm using burlap. So I just put some burlap circles there. And this one, you would probably be able to see the polyfill inside. But I'm going to be adding cinnamon to this one as well, so that will hide any little bit of that polyfill that you have in there, or that you can see. And with this one, I just glued it and left a little opening to stuff it. And as you can see, that's so much easier than the way I did the last one. And then again, I just kind of trimmed off the ones that were protruding too far out. Some of these I wanted to have a really wispy look to. This was not one of them. I wanted these little leaves to be a little bit shorter, so I trimmed this one all the way around. And I think the more that you can kind of rough up those edges and get some fraying, the better that they're going to look. And on some of my flowers, I even took a little sander, not an electric sander, but one of the little bitty hand sanders, and just sanded over those edges to rough them up. And I'll show you in one of my other videos how that works. As you can see, I'm just really roughing it up. And this next flower is one that my sister had done, and so I asked her to do it on camera. So she's getting ready to create something with a different fabric, but in the way she did this flower. Now, I have another friend that is starting another channel, and her name is Gina, and she's the one who brings me the rusty, crusty things when she's out yard selling or thrifting. She's so good at finding those things. And she does, she has a booth, and she does things in a more primitive style. So the pumpkin that I showed in my last video that was made from fence panels, her first video was showing how to do that. Now, she said that the video wasn't the quality that she had hoped for, but she wanted to get that out. So she did her first video and made that look so easy. She did such a good job on it, and I think you'll be amazed at how simple it is. So I'm going to attach that video in my description, and so you guys can go check her out, and hopefully you'll like what she does and subscribe to her channel and help her get started. And I hope you guys are okay with me sharing the links of my friends that are starting channels, because I just really love to support other people and help them get started. And it would have been much easier for me if I'd had someone to share and help me get the subscribers I needed to get a good start. So I am so happy to help anybody who is starting a channel. I'm so happy to mention them and help them get started, because sometimes that's all that you need, is just a good start. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm always looking for new channels to watch that do the kind of crafting that I can learn from. And I just feel like it's hard to find. So I think there's plenty of this to go around. And I love sharing my ideas with other people, and I absolutely love getting new ideas from other people. So I think it's a win-win. Now, Tammy is using curtain shears here that she has torn into strips, and she's also using, it's hard to tell that that's a gingham fabric that's pink and white, but it's such a muted pink and white that it's gonna it's going to go with this just well enough to give it some dimension, but to keep it really soft. So now these shears, I didn't find this color of shear. I actually took some muted pink and added it to some water, and I dyed it that way. So you just put several drops into your water and just kind of mix it around with your hands until you get what you want. And if you want to make sure that it's not too strong, then just use a small piece of fabric to test it. But I just put this in and immediately just wrung it out and left it outside to dry, and then we tore these into strips. And as you can see, she is looping these around a canning lid, just the way I did with the bracelet. She's doing this with a canning lid. Now we're making fall flowers, but you can combine more of the muted colors in with your fall decor. So because this is not a bright pink, it will go well with some of your neutrals to decorate for fall. But then it's not limited to fall. And then when you get all of these put on and you get your little ring filled where you can't see any of it, then she takes a piece of burlap, and this is a piece of burlap that has been printed on. And if you want something that's already printed on, then all you have to do is just stamp on it, and it's going to work just the same. So we've been playing with these flowers, different types of flowers, and just kind of trying to figure out what works. And this particular circle could have been just a little bit larger, but she's just going to glue that in the center and make it work. So you're just going to carefully glue all the way around and try to push that out somewhat so that you can stuff it and have some dimension in the front. And you want your circle large enough, but not much larger than she has it, because you don't want it to show in the back either. Now you could make it a little bit larger and then cut off your excess, but she's trying to avoid cutting off any excess. And I love the contrast. This may not be, burlap may not be what you would put with this, but as you can see, the contrast is so pretty, and then it adds, so you have the softness from the wispy muted pink fabric, and then you have that burlap. And I just think the contrast adds just so much of a rustic touch to it. It just really works. Now, she decided to do this. I wouldn't have thought of that, honestly, but I love how this looks together. So she just stuffed it as much as she could comfortably stuff it and still put the flat part of the canning lid on the back. So then she just glued that in place, and then that will be strong enough. You need something strong enough on the back to push that polyfill out really well and give the front enough dimension, if that makes sense. So she glued the lid in place, and now she's gluing a piece of cardboard on the back because the look of that shiny metal wouldn't look good. So you could either paint it or cover that up, but she's covering it up, and she just cut a piece of cardboard to fit. She used the ring to draw that out, and now she's taking some jute twine and gluing it all the way around to hide that seam. And then she'll take that jute twine and make a little loop and put a hanger on the back. Now, if you've never tried making fall flowers, or any flowers for that matter, flowers is something that just about anyone can create, just kind of dream up out of your mind, and they can be made out of so many different materials. So if you ever have some time to just sit down and play, flowers are a good option. So now I'm taking this piece of yellow fabric, and this is not printed on both sides, but this is not going to matter because the way that I'm making this flower, it's not going to show. So I just kind of fold it in half, and you probably got about 3 inches, I guess, when you fold it in half. So essentially this will be like a 6-inch strip. And then I'm folding it in half, and then I fold it several times lengthwise so that I can cut out the petals and I won't have to cut each individual one out. So I just very carefully fold it in half and then fold it in half again, and then one more time, and then I cut my loops. And you want to cut these where the cut side or the round side of the petal is on the cut side of your fabric. So the fold, you're not going to cut that fold because you want to leave that. So then you're going to have the front and the back of your petal, if that makes sense. And then I'm just going to loop these around this bangle bracelet. This is one that I just happened to have in my jewelry that hadn't sold yet, so I wanted to use it for this. But I did find some on Amazon. I haven't been able to find them at any store except for a few metal ones from Walmart, and I didn't want to have to pay that for them. But I did find some at a reasonable price on Amazon, and I will link that in the description. So I'm first gluing that around and lining that up to where the front and the back of the petal match. And then I'm going to kind of scrunch them together. So that's why I'm not gluing up next to my bracelet. I'm just gluing that in so that it will allow me to scrunch them together. And then when I'm ready to scrunch them, then I can add some glue and push them together. So I just kind of stick some glue up on my on the bracelet part, and then just squish that one next to the other one. So it's a very easy way to make petals. So I just do that all the way around. So now I'm putting my last one on, and then I can make my center. And just like I talked about before, if you don't have burlap that is printed and you want printed burlap, then you can just stencil on top of it, which is exactly what I'm going to do with this one. I just took a piece of burlap, and then I took one of my stencils that I thought I wanted it to look like a sack that came that way. So I found one that I thought would work. And I'm just taking my black ink and a makeup brush, and I will link these brushes in the description. They work really well for stenciling with an ink pad. So, but I just do enough of this that I'll be able to make my circle, and then I cut out a circle. And I put one on both the front and the back. But first, I needed to put the back one on first, and then I'll stuff it and then add the front one. But before I add the front one, I'm going to add a stem to this. And all I did was just pick out a stick in the yard and cut it the length that I needed it. And then I'm just going to glue that on the center, and then glue the circle of burlap over the top of that. Now I'll just glue, it's going to overlap the petals to some degree, which is what I want. And then once I get the burlap glued on, then I'm going to leave the rough edge and actually rough it up just a little bit more with my fingers. But then I'm going to go around the front only with just a little piece of rickrack, and I just did that in yellow, and I just glued it all the way around with hot glue, and then this little flower was finished. And next I'm going to show you another way you can do the petals without having to cut these, and also without having to loop the way Tammy was doing. Because for some people that have problems with arthritis in their hands or carpal tunnel, it's a little harder to loop those. So tying them on, I find, can be real much easier for me. So I just cut some little strips, and you can go wider or thinner on these. Obviously, if you go thinner, you're going to have to add more. But I did maybe about 5 inches long. You could go 6, or I wouldn't go less than 4 because it's just too hard. But I just tied one knot in these. I didn't even double knot them. I just tied one knot, because once you get all these on here and they're kind of squished together, that knot is not going to come loose. So again, I just tie it all the way around, and then I can do the center just like I did the others, or the way Tammy did hers, either way. But I just wanted to show you another option if you do struggle with your hands. But as you can see, it's a really pretty look. So again, just play with these. You can find so many ways to make flowers. Now the next flower that I'm going to do is very, very simple. So you just cut some squares or tear some squares. Either way, tearing is nice, but you can't really, you can tear your strips, but then when you go to cut them in squares, you kind of need to cut those. But I didn't even cut them exact. I just did them similar in size, and they don't have to be exact squares either. But what I do is I just took a couple of different prints here. You could do more if you want it. As you can see, one of these is not even printed on both sides, but because it's a lighter color, it's still going to work. So what I do is just put a dot of hot glue in the center, a pretty substantial dot, and then I just kind of stagger these so that the corners aren't lined up, and I just keep gluing them on and kind of squishing them in the center to create a little bit of dimension. And I just do that until I feel like I have enough. I probably did about anywhere from 7 to 10, I guess, and that's a guess. But just do it until you feel like it's going to be full enough. But and this is not all that I'll do to these, but this is very simple. And these are fun to make. You can make these larger if you want, but this works well for a smaller flower. So now that I have that done, and it looks like maybe I put 7 or 8, then I just take my scissors, and I'm kind of cutting those little points off somewhat. Again, this doesn't have to be exact at all, and you could leave the points. But for me, I just wanted to cut the points. And then I'm just cutting a slit all the way around. And it's easy to stop in the middle because you have that glue that will stop you. So you're just kind of cutting it all the way. And you could cut your cuts closer than I have. The second one that I did a little bit closer. But now all you're doing is just roughing that up. So you're going to rough it up all you can with your fingers to make it fluffy. And as you can see, it starts to look like a flower. But then that's not all that I'm going to do. I'm going to take my little sander, and I am going to just really, really rough up the edges. And then you'll get all the fraying, and that's what you're going to want. And these are just ones that I think everyone can make. And there I'm getting my little sander and just really, and don't be afraid to really, really sand them, because the more you sand them, the more frayed they're going to get. And actually, the more slits that you put in with your scissors, the more fraying that you're going to get. So when you get all these, when you get it sanded enough to where you feel like you've got enough fraying, then you just kind of fluff it up again, and it just makes a really pretty flower. Now you could do, these are 2 different fabrics, but they don't contrast a whole lot. I wanted to keep these soft. So I feel like you need a couple of different prints just because it just gives it more dimension and makes it look more like a flower. But if you took two totally different colors, then obviously you're going to get, it's going to look like you have a lot more dimension. I just wanted the soft look. I wanted a very neutral flower that I could add into my fall decor. Now, I felt like these needed a center, so I just rolled up a piece of trim, and kind of like I would do if I was making a shabby rose, and just glued that right in the center. Now, you could use anything. You could put a button in the center of these, or you could put a little pearl bead, but that's just what I did to finish my center off. And then to add the stem, I just glued that bottom layer around it and then cut off the excess, and that held it well to the stem. As you can see, I just kind of wrapped it around all the way and then cut off the excess, and then I wrapped what was unattractive there with some jute twine, and that gave it more of a finished look and just kind of made it blend with the stem. And now I'm going to show you one more flower that I just love, and I did the outside the same way. I just took a bangle bracelet and looped my strips of fabric all the way around it. Now, if you wanted to make these smaller, you could also use a shower curtain hook. That would be a cheap way to do this, but I didn't have access to any of those either. So I just looped this all the way around, just like I did the others. And I actually did some of these in teal also, and I dyed those the same way. I just put my sheer in some water with a few drops of the paint, and then I took them outside and hung them to dry. But it just makes a really pretty dye, I think, and then you can determine your colors much more easily. Now for this one, I wanted to make sure that I had enough fabric to really give this dimension in the front, because this is going to be a coneflower, or actually the technical term for it is echinacea. But I know you guys have seen these coneflowers, and one thing that is very distinctive about them is they really have that puffy center there in the middle and on top of the flower, actually. So for this one, I'm going to be adding my stem to the bottom. So I just worked that fabric, and I didn't mention before, this is Warm and Natural fabric, and I will link that in the description. I use Warm and Natural fabric very often. I use it in so many of my projects, so that's something I always have on hand, and I always have some coffee dyed ahead of time. So what I do is just make a strong pot of coffee and stick the Warm and Natural fabric down in, and then just put it outside to dry. And so here I'm just kind of working it up into, to make sure that I have that really puffy, and I'm just kind of gluing it as I go. Now this is just where you just kind of have to work with it. You have to work to make sure you don't get little wrinkles in the sides, but you just glue it all the way around until you have that puffed up the way you want it. And then you're just going to cut away all your excess fabric. And once I have that trimmed really neatly, then I am going to put my polyfill in there and glue a piece of cardboard on the back. Now, when you glue the cardboard on the back, you want to make sure that you have a hole punched in the center of that. You can either drill it or punch it in there with something. You want to make sure that you have a hole in the center of that cardboard so that you're going to be able to add your stem. So I actually did that, and then I glued a piece of that Warm and Natural over the top of it, just so it would finish the back in the same finish as the front. And I just kind of poked a hole in it before I put it on there. So I'm just gluing it on, and I don't have to leave room in this one to put the stem up through the bottom, because remember, I'm adding it to the underneath of the flower there where I have the hole in the center. So So I just glue that on, and then I take my glue gun and squirt some glue up in that hole, and then I attach my stem, which is again just a stick that I found in the yard. So I haven't added my stem at this point, but I want to make that center look more like the center of a coneflower. So I just took some Mod Podge and put it all over the top, being careful not to get any on my flower petals. And then I just sprinkled cinnamon, and I did it pretty heavy because if you look at the center of a coneflower, it's mostly brown. And then here I am adding my stem. So again, I have that hole there. So I just want to make sure that I can work it up in there. And I made sure to get plenty of glue up inside, and then just stick that in the bottom, and then there is your coneflower. And I think this one is my favorite. And now I'll just kind of show you all of the flowers that we did. And some of them will just be bowl fillers. Some of them we put on a stem to put in an arrangement. And I even put some scripture in the center of one of them. But there's my little fluffy flowers that I did. And as you can see, I really got them to fray well. And there's another one that I added some scripture to. The one there on the bottom is one that Tammy did, and I meant to have her do that on video, but I didn't get that one on video. But my least favorite is the one with the Raffia grass, because it's just very stiff. If it wasn't stiff, I think it would be a very pretty fall flower. But as it turns out, it is my least favorite. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and God bless you and your family.